Great.
There we go. Cool. So yeah, so I guess I'll kick it off. This is I think the third recorded session in the hackathon. We got a couple of team members from GitLab on the doc side, Axel and Mike joining us. So Mike, why don't I turn things over to you and you can introduce yourself and get things started.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks, Ray. Can you guys see my slides?
Not yet.
All right, hang on. Just a second here.
There we go. Yep.
Okay, yep. Excellent. Okay, so I'm the technical writing manager here at GitLab, where our team, Axel is part of the team, one of the technical writers. We work on the documentation site, which is at docs.gitlab.com. So we're going to tell you a little bit about how to get started with contributing to docs. If you are new to GitLab or even a seasoned contributor, it's always good to have a refresher. So we'll kick in. So where they're published, we'll cover the location of the files that you're going to be editing or creating, and the types of edits you'll make. It sort of depends on whether you're a developer updating docs with the code you're changing, or someone who simply wants to make an edit to an existing doc. And then we also have sorry, I'm hearing some audio in the background. We also have the Community Writers Program, where folks can contribute longer form articles on specific use cases. So firstly, where it's published, we have our docs site on the web at docs.gitlab.com. And we also publish our Community Edition and Enterprise Edition versions of the docs respectively within GitLab itself, so that when you're on your own domain in GitLab, you can view the docs at /help. And then here, just to show you at the bottom of every docs page, we have an edit this page link, and that's going to be the simplest way to make a small edit and affix to the docs. So we have so here's sort of the structure of how those pages are created, just at a high level. We use a static site generator that pulls our markdown files in and creates HTML. It's a little inaccurate here in that the Nanic static site generator really only creates the web version of our content, and with CE and EE, it's we push our code to those to /help otherwise, but this is sort of a simplified version. You'll see there's 4 different repositories at the top where these are the primary repositories for these GitLab products, and we have within each one there's a documentation subpath. So typically that's /doc. Most of the time you'll be doing your work as a contributor in GitLab CE, the Community Edition, and we have a /doc path in there. Okay, so a closer look at /doc. So once you're in the repository, some of the most frequently used subpaths, and we do organize, the subpaths are the same as the paths that you'll see when you do go to the docs website, and these are the most popular sections. So most likely you'll be working on files within /doc, and then within /user, CI, which is continuous integration and deployment, GitLab basics, the API docs, or administration. One little caveat to know about is that in EE, the docs are nearly identical to the docs in CE. As a contributor, primarily you only need to concern yourself with the CE docs, and the GitLab tech writing team will handle ensuring that the doc is essentially exists in both places. So how to get started. So first, find an issue. This can be something that you've discovered on your own, an issue with the documentation. Maybe you're reading a doc and you find something that's a little unclear, or just a blatant typo. You're welcome to jump in and do that. You can also find an existing issue that we have. We've got plenty waiting to go within the GitLab, GitLab.org group. So anything that's slated for documentation will have the documentation label. But on top of that, you may want to also search for issues that have that label along with any of these things, accepting merge requests as a label, or simply it's in the backlog, which means by default, merge requests are welcome. you're welcome to contribute, or really any other issue of interest. If you simply search for documentation, and I'll give you a look at that now, you'll be able to, if you feel like you want to contribute on anything, you're welcome to go ahead and do it. So the one caveat here before I jump in is that an issue with a documentation label could be a shared issue that other teams are also working on. So just give it a read, make sure that the task at hand is really documentation focused, and it's not a issue that requires development first, unless you're a developer and you want to jump in on that as well. So here I'm in issues. I'm just going to search for label documentation. I'll do the search first. And there are plenty of issues here, and you can add label accepting merge requests. So just as one example of a way to find an issue to dive in on if you're not sure where to begin. Okay, so back to this. So I think we skipped a couple things. Okay, so I want to show you how to make a simple update to docs. This is especially helpful if you've never worked in GitLab before. The easiest way to get started is at the bottom of every doc page, we have an edit this page button, and I'll just show you this, actually. It's probably easier just to show you. So let's go to docs.gitlab.com. And I'll go to the administrator doc. And let's say we see something on this page that we don't like and want to change. We'll scroll to the bottom. There's an edit this page link. You can click the link. Okay. Okay, and it brings you right to the appropriate page within GitLab. So you're actually viewing the underlying markdown file that generates that HTML file. Then you can simply edit the file right in GitLab. We have our native editor and our newer web IDE. For simplicity, with a simple edit, I'll just use the native editor here. So I'll click Edit. If it's your first time working on the GitLab CE repository in your GitLab account, it's going to ask you to fork the project. So I did that before this call, but might take a couple of minutes, but then you'll be good to go. So then here you are, you're editing the file. I'll make a small change, like for example, this is wrapping and hard to read. So it's not a good example because it's below the list. Let's make the smallest possible change. Okay, and then I'm going to go down to add a commit message and say added text wrapping and commit my changes. Okay, so you'll see that the changes were committed. GitLab created a branch on its own for you. It's called patch 30. That's in, this is my username, doc contributor. So this is within my fork. It's created this branch, and we're making a request to merge this into GitLab's master branch. So we start out with the first box here. We have a template for documentation. Jump me down. Adding text wrapping. So my commit message is brought in here, but you can always change that to be more specific. And you can start this out as a work in progress and then work on these checkboxes later. Most of these actually won't apply if you're a contributor, or if you know you're about to submit this, you can just leave it without WIP for work in progress. So I'm just going to scroll down, source branch, target branch, and the one thing I'll check is allow commits from members who can merge to the target branch, because you may likely need or want some help from the technical writing team or others within GitLab. So we should be able to just add commits rather than having to ask you to make changes depending on the circumstances. So that's definitely recommended. So now I'll simply submit merge request. Okay, so here's our new merge request. The markdown checkboxes were converted. So now as a contributor, applying labels and milestones doesn't apply. Cross-linking the document, you'll see this in the documentation guidelines that I'll link you to at the end, but essentially this is not, if you're just editing one page, there's no need to add any links from other pages from the higher level or from related pages. Badges and tiers, adding that doesn't apply. The tech writers will port this to Enterprise Edition for you. Really the only thing you need to do is have a technical writer review. So you can feel free to leave these unchecked. And then you'll see there's already a pipeline running automatically, checking your code. Okay, so then the one thing that you should do to make sure that this gets looked at by the technical writing team is just @message us. So your first comment, you can say whatever you'd like, but definitely mention @GL. Let's see. There's a hyphen in it, so it may not be that easy. Docs team. If you mention the hackathon, we'll be sure to get this merged for you quickly, so I recommend that too. So why didn't that work? It's a backslash. Okay. And that's it. That's really the simplest workflow for making a change. We'll either just merge your change straight away, or we'll get back to you with some questions or suggestions. And you can feel free to ping us at any time. So even before you get to work, you're welcome to message us, GL-docs team in the original issue, or we'll give you some other ways to reach us. So I'll quickly switch back to the presentation here for a few more notes. Can't see my button. Okay. So on the other side of the coin, you might be a developer who is working with the GitLab GDK, who also needs to edit docs. Essentially at GitLab, if you make a change to the code that adds a feature or changes a feature, and it impacts the user experience or the admin experience, you also need to submit changes to the docs alongside of that. So essentially, it's just additional files that you'll include in your merge request. So you'll already have your local fork of GitLab and the GitLab GDK, which if you want more info about that, not only do we have the contributing page on about.gitlab.com, but we had a talk earlier today, I believe, from Toon. So that should be, we should be able to link to that later. You can definitely find that as one of the hackathon videos. So you'll navigate to the doc path just as you did in GitLab, find the file, include it with your commit and your MR. Okay, so more info. Again, we have the contributing page, which goes through the key steps for documentation, for development, various ways to contribute. On that page, we link to these 2 extra links. Really covers the full scope of what you need to know if you're working on documentation at GitLab. Some more details on, like, if you're creating a brand new doc, where to put the file, you know, how to link. There's a style guide that shows you how to use various elements of Markdown and things of that nature. And then if you have any questions at any time, you're welcome to reach out to us. You can reach out to the team, again, with GL Docs team in GitLab itself. You can email us, docs@gitlab.com. And then we'll be monitoring Gitter during the hackathon, so just you feel free to jump in there as well. Or just ask any GitLabber and they can connect you to TechWriter. I think that's all I had. If anyone has any questions or anything I left out, just let me know.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, I especially for like a new contributors, I definitely think documentation is probably easiest. way to get started. I mean, you don't even need to worry about a lot of times command lines or GDKs. I mean, what I've done, like when I first got started, like Mike mentioned, was that I'll read through documentations and I'll find a typo and just hit that nice friendly little edit this page button, and then off you go. You rarely have to leave that browser window, I find. So that's I think that's like a pretty cool feature we have to make things easy.
Agreed. And yeah, we try to make the workflow easy for contributors. If you do have any trouble with it, we're interested, let us know. And also you may want to play around with the web IDE, which I didn't cover, which is relatively new. And it's helpful if you want to edit multiple files, include them in one merge request, but do it all within the UI. So that's something to consider as well if you haven't used it yet.
Mike, I do have a question, a couple actually. So you mentioned in the presentation there are two sets of documentation for C and E, and yes, contributors generally only have to concern themselves with CE. But could you tell us, just to have an idea, what's the difference, if there's any? I mean, I've noticed, for example, that on docs.gitlab.com, there's lots of documents where there's a particular feature, and then there's a note to make sure people know that this is only available on Ultimate, for example, or Alt, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So most of the time we try to include badges, which essentially, and you'll see this if you search the documentation that I shared with you guys, but basically we have badges that specify which tier of GitLab the feature is included in. So and you've probably seen this if you read the docs. There'll be a spot that tells you, this is only included in a certain tier. So we manually include those. That's especially helpful when there's a feature where there's a single page with some product that has multiple features. Some of them are available in core, some of them are available in premium or another tier. So we like to specify, let you know what you can actually see based on, or what you can actually use based on your GitLab tier. But on top of that, we also have some pages that are only in the EE repository because they're only available in EE. Those features are only in EE, so there's really no need to include them in the CE docs and sort of confuse people. We are considering making changes there and having a single set of documentation, but that's the state for now. The only other change you may notice in some docs is the way that we link to docs. So you may have in the CE docs, if you're linking to an EE doc, it's going to be a full URL because you can't have a relative link to an EE page because it doesn't exist in the CE repository. So sometimes the only difference you'll see across parallel CE and EE doc, they're the same path, everything else is identical, but the format of the links is a little different. So that's the kind of thing that it may be obvious once you start taking a look at the files, but a tech writer is happy to help resolve as part of the process of reviewing the MR.
Cool.
Hope that answers the question.
Yes. I was just trying to unmute myself. It does. Thank you.
No problem.
Cool.
Yeah, anything else, guys?
If no one jumps in, I've got a couple more.
Please.
I know that you guys use Markdown for the documentation. Do you use any particular extensions to Markdown that contributors should be aware of? Is this something that's documented in your style guide?
I believe we do talk about the engine, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, Axel, it's Red Carpet, which may be changing in the near future, but that's what we use. And we do have documentation as part of that development section on tech writing that covers how to preview your changes. So not only can you preview them in the GitLab UI, but you can actually view a review app to see a preview of the GitLab site in terms of what the changes are going to look like on the actual site. So that'll sort of confirm for you that you're using the right form of Markdown. That said, I haven't really run into any quirks. It's pretty standard. It's a pretty standard interpretation of Markdown, if that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I particularly appreciate that review app that shows you the changes live for your merge proposal. That's really cool. Actually, I've been using it in the last few days. I mean, I'm relatively new to GitLab, and I just discovered it recently, and I was just, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, you'll see it. Yeah, that's good to point out. So when you do create the merge request, you'll see the pipeline created where your code is being tested. There should be a link to view the review app, which should be published. You might have to come back to it because there are some tests that are run on your code when you create the MR. So that link should be to view the app should show up right on the MR, and you'll be able to link out, view a sort of temporary copy of this of the doc site as it would be created by your branch of the code with your latest changes, and you can actually navigate to that same page that you've tried to edit, and you'll see your changes. So you'll know if you did it the right way, and you can always go back and make further changes within your MR.
That's really cool. It's really cool. There's another thing that I noticed that you guys have been working on, and I know these early stages, but I was really happy to see it, is doc versioning in terms of making sure that there's every GitLab release has got its own version of the docs. Could you tell us a bit more what you've been working on in there and what impact might have to contributors?
I'm sorry, I lost you for a second. Could you just repeat?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So I was talking about doc versioning in the context of having a particular version of the docs for a particular version of GitLab. I know that it's early stages still, but I know that you guys have already been working on it. Could you tell us a bit more about it and what impact it might have to any contributor?
Sure. So right now, the way that we publish the site is that the master branch code is what gets published on docs.gitlab.com in the default path. We do include, we do keep previous versions of the docs online. So if you, after docs.gitlab.com, you add like /11.1 or 11.2, which are some recent GitLab versions, but the rest of the path is the same. You'll see the previous version of GitLab docs. So they are there, the last few versions. And beyond that, we do also have archives that will let you download. You can freely download and build if you need an even older version. That said, if you have GitLab installed, if you have an older version of GitLab installed, because we publish within the product itself, you'll have the version of docs for your version of GitLab right within the product. So there's always that. That said, what we'd like to get to is the ability to easily switch versions on the site. So we have a bunch of changes in the pipeline that we're working on to make that an easy process. We recently added a versions dropdown at the top of the page where you can switch to a different version. It's sort of a really basic minimum viable change where it links you to the home page of the previous version. So what we're going to do is make it so it links you to the same page but in a previous version to kind of have a more seamless switch, and then hopefully make it easy to get to that to the relevant version from GitLab itself, but link out to docs.gitlab. So we've got a few improvements that we're currently working on there. But I think the most important thing to know is that these several versions are all online. It's just that we're showing you the latest, and that means that you may be seeing a doc that was just published for the next GitLab release that's coming out, in a week or two.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks, Mike.
Of course. Anything else, guys?
Well, sounds like no other questions.
Well, thanks guys for having me.
Right.
Looking forward to
thank you, Mike. Thanks, Axel.
Getting some good docs contributors. And again, we're here anytime if you guys have questions about docs to reach out.
All right, cool. Cool.
Excellent.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks again.
Yep. Have a good day or evening, wherever you are.
Happy hackathon.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.